took me home and he said, "This will be our little secret." One day I had gone downtown and I saw a man passing out tracts. And I purposely went across the street to tell him how stupid I thought that was, because I felt like, that was just like a history lesson and everybody knew that, and why would anybody care that, Jesus lived and died and all that kind of stuff. And so I went over and I gave him a hard time. Turned out the guy had just been a believer for 2 weeks. And I was really just telling him what a jerk he was. I was just had all kinds of attitude with him. And he said, "Let me get my friend." So he got his friend. His friend started sharing the gospel with me. And it was the first time I had heard it in my life. I had never heard, I'd heard Bible stories. I'd heard that God loved me. I heard that God, we should worship God. But I never heard that God wanted to come into my heart and live through me. And it was amazing to me. And I remember saying to the guy, "Okay, you got me crying. What do I do now?" And he said, "Just pray." And I prayed right there on a street corner, and I felt a physical weight come off my shoulders. And I remember just like floating after that, and I just wanted to tell the whole world, "Jesus loves you, Jesus loves you." So I got saved, and I was just like in love with Jesus, and I just got into his word, and it was like for the first time in my life it made sense to me. And I couldn't get enough. I was just so in love with him. On my 16th birthday, I could finally get a job, and so I went to a restaurant in town and applied and got the job, and it was an awesome thing. Well, then a few weeks later, I switched to the night shift, and I started to get off at either 4 in the morning or 7 in the morning. And there was a night when I didn't have a ride home. And I remember my manager, this manager that was a Christian, saying, "I'll get you home, don't worry about it, I'll get you home if you'll take this shift." And so I worked that night, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, he was going to take me home. And I mean, we had been talking about the Lord 2 minutes before that, and got in his car, and he drove the opposite direction and took me out in the country and raped me. And I was paralyzed. I just shook with fear, and I remember him getting angry at me. And he took me home, and he said, "This will be our little secret." And I remember walking in the house thinking I'd never be the same.
Awesome.
Well, the next week, I had to go back to work, and I'll drive there, and I will never be around him again. It was a huge restaurant. I thought I'll just keep my distance from him. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, I remember hearing my name on the intercom. And he did it again at work. And I was beyond, I was a mess. And I remember hiding in the bathroom. I never wanted to show my face again. I just felt like I was the biggest piece of trash. So I didn't tell anybody, and I didn't forgive him, and it started to grow in my heart like an infection, just bitterness. I was so angry. And yet I was so hurt, and people would notice things in my life and say, "What's wrong with you? You've changed." Everything that had been black and white was suddenly gray. It was like I was in a pit, and I wasn't yelling for help. there was a guy in one of my classes that kept asking me out, and God was making it very clear, don't go there. Bad news, don't go there. He's not a believer. And finally, I gave in and I went out with him, and I thought, what can one date hurt? One date was the beginning of 3 years of agony. My life was just, I started to party a lot. I just wanted to party my life away because I didn't want to remember what was going on. So I graduated from high school and still going out with this guy, and I got sick and I couldn't get better. And every day I'd come home sick, and my mom said, I'm going to take you to the doctor. What's wrong with you? Well, I remember my boyfriend saying, you could be pregnant. And I said, oh, no. No. My dad's a pastor. That is not an option here. That is not happening. But I went to one of those places where people protest. I remember sitting there, and she told me I was, and it's just like my whole world came crashing down. And they never, ever mentioned the word baby. They said, we can help you. I couldn't bear to think of it as a baby. I just couldn't. And I went back and I had an abortion. And I remember I was supposed to just go on as if it didn't happen, but it was like this gaping wound in my heart. I kept trying to cover it with Band-Aids, and I needed a heart surgery. And by this time I was so far from God, I was just convinced that he would never take me back. And so then, that's when the alcohol just really kicked in on a daily basis. Just trying to forget. I went to college. I remember telling people, I said, it was awful. I would tell people, I said, I'm the person that your mom doesn't want you to meet at college. Because I made it my goal to bring people down with me. I don't know what I was thinking. And I did. And I just partied and partied and partied. My good friends were saying, you're going to crash and burn in no time. And I didn't care. I had no care if I lived or died. I just didn't care. I wanted to come back to God, but I was in chains. And I was convinced, why would God take me back? Why? Why should he? And about that time, 3 weeks after I broke up with my boyfriend, I started to get sick. And it felt way too familiar. And I remember walking out to a place that could test me for pregnancy. I was pregnant again. And I went and I stood next to a lake. It was below zero. And I remember my tears were freezing in my eyes, the eyelashes. And I remember saying, God, my life is trashed. If I have the baby, if I don't have the baby, my life is trashed. I might as well just end it. I just had no hope at all. So I went and I had another abortion. I remember thinking God would not why would God take me back? Why would he ever want me back? I had 2 abortions. I had pulled people away from his kingdom. I had done everything possible to make him look bad. I was like his worst example of a child. And yet I came crawling back to him and I said, God, would you take me back as your servant? And that day I went and I got baptized. And when I came up out of the water, my pastor looked me in the eye and he said, I feel like you've said in your heart, God, do I even know you? Do I even want to know you? He said, God's got a verse for you. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. And at that point I had neither, but I just clung on to that word. I said, okay, God, if you say this, if you will take me back, God, I will believe you. I will choose to believe that you will use me and that you have a future for me. And God just started to heal me big time. I had huge wounds from the past. It was like if somebody bumped up against me, ooh, it was like anger and rage would come out. God showed me, you need to forgive. And he took me to a verse right after the Lord's Prayer that says, if I'm going to forgive you, you've got to forgive others. And I remember sitting there with a woman praying about this. It was the first time I'd ever told my story to a soul. Not anybody knew. And I told her, and she said, you need to forgive him. I had no idea. I had no idea how much rage I had in my heart. Even when I decided, okay, if God says I have to, I'll do it. I couldn't make my mouth say the words. Finally, I realized it was a choice. It was not going to be a feeling. I didn't feel ooey gooey, like, oh yay, this guy's a great guy now. I felt like if God was going to forgive me, then I needed to forgive him. So I forgave him. And that was a huge turning point in my life. Well, next I realized that I thought I needed to forgive myself. And God just showed me, opened my eyes, and said, no, I have forgiven you. You don't have to forgive yourself. You walk in the forgiveness that I paid for. I owed a huge debt, but it had been paid at the cross. And I was justified. It was just as if I'd never sinned. I had peace with God for the first time in my whole life. And I was on fire. I was like, God, why do you love me so much? How do you love me so much? I don't even get it. My whole life is drastically different now. I wake up with joy. I go to bed with joy. I minister to other people with joy. I just have it it just consumes me because I'm so thankful for what God has done. I have a purpose in my life now. I'm no longer searching. I'm no longer searching for meaning or for happiness or for direction in my life, because I have God, and his word keeps speaking to me, speaks that direction to me. His word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And I can count on him to carry me through and to use me for his purposes. And it's all because I'm free. I am free. He whom the Son sets free is free indeed. And I am free. And I want you to be free too. My name is Barb, and I am changed.